Hi everyone, this is Randy Kim from the Bun Me Chronicles podcast, and today I am doing an emergency episode in the coverage of the ice raids that have been happening throughout the Chicagoland area, and I am welcoming in Lilly Lay. Lilly has been a community service manager at the Vietnamese Association of Illinois, otherwise known as VAI. Um, Her work focuses on building community and power among Vietnamese people in Illinois through intergenerational community engagement and leadership development. Before joining VAI, she was a student organizer with U Chicago United at the University of Chicago, fighting for material resources and building power among students of color and the surrounding communities. She received her bachelor's in sociology and critical race and ethnic studies from the University of Chicago. Lilly is committed to grassroots power building work to equip our communities with tools for healing and self-determination. And today it is Thursday, October 30th, 2:06 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time. And Lily, I am very happy to finally connect with you. I have been a board member with VAI for the past year, and thanks to Van, who is the executive director, she was happy to connect me with you because you have been doing a lot of community organizing work and also because of the current atmosphere that's going on. The Vietnamese Association of Illinois is located in the Chicago North Side. It's in the uptown area, and a lot of the Vietnamese communities have kind of like shifted. But this is where a lot of the original Southeast Asian community was living in, and then it has like pushed out into different suburbs, like more like in Carroll Street, more in the far west suburbs as well. But Lily, first of all, how have you been navigating this past month with what's going on with both ICE raids and with the SNAP issues that are affecting the Vietnamese communities that you are serving?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm also really glad to be finally connected with you. And it's definitely been a lot of uh, just a huge sense of urgency, right, with things rolling out. I feel like in just this month alone, um, there was so much uh, like news and raids, right, every single day, us like just trying to keep up with. Um, Making sure that our community is not just informed, but also prepared, right, to take necessary precautions and actions in order to keep themselves safe, but also look out for one another. So I think it's been, in some ways, a very fast environment, right, in which a lot of people, aside from the AI, have been scrambling to organize themselves to find very concrete sort of action steps to do in this moment. Um, and at the same time, I think I'm very grounded in the fact that, the work that we've been doing at VI, especially in the past few years, to lay a strong foundation for the community organizing work with our elders, to reconnect right with the residents of Uptown and around Argyle. I think that served as a very important groundwork for us to be ready for moments of crisis like this.
Yeah, thank you. And how would you describe the Vietnamese community and also surrounding communities in the uptown area where VAI is located? I was wondering if you can kind of shed some light into the communities that you have been
Mhm.
working closely with.
Totally, yeah. Most of the folks that live in that area, most of the Vietnamese folks, right, are elders who, some of them have lived there literally since, right, the very first wave of refugees arriving in Illinois. So we work with people who have just stayed in Uptown for 50 years. There's also majority of those folks are low income who live in affordable housing buildings in Uptown. And I think Uptown in general, right, the demographic of that area is very diverse. I think it has a very special history when it comes to the community organizing efforts there. And the ways that the community historically, over the past 100 years, right, have come together to protect resources for poor people and people of color. And in my work, right, I meet a lot of folks who are just born and raised in that area, have seen so much history, right, of how the community has been disinvested from. And of course, Uptown, right, has uh, a long history of gentrification, um, right? So in the Roaring Twenties, right, there's all these theaters being built. It's advertised as a huge entertainment district, right? But then at the same time, there's all this history of um, poor people of all races, right? White, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Southeast Asian refugees, right? All kind of being put into this area and segregated into specific blocks and sort of cut off, right, from the wealthy upper class. Um, and of course, they have to do what they have to do. And um, in my work, right, I think it's very interesting because I'm not from the area. I'm learning a lot of this history by talking to people, of course, reading things, educating myself, right? And also sort of seeing the ways that the people that we work with lived through that history and seeing it firsthand, right? But there's like certain sort of gaps in historical knowledge, right? Like the context of why things came to be the way they are. Um, I think there's sometimes, right, a sort of historical amnesia, which is very dangerous, and we see this playing out even now, right? For example, folks are aware there's a lot of Section 8 housing in that area, and Vietnamese elders, right, are very reliant on that and understand that's like a huge benefit, right, for the community. Um, But the missing piece, I guess, of the story is, for example, why is it that there's all those buildings there,
Mhm.
right? And some of the work that we've been doing is to show them the history of how people in the 60s and 70s really had to organize, right, to secure those resources in the area. Um, and they're resources that still benefit the community, right, 50 years later. And um, in moments like this, when it's just so blatant, right? The ways that the current federal government is very much intent on cutting down all of these very important community resources. Um, it's been a big opportunity for us to highlight the ways that uh, we can be in solidarity with one another and protect each other, and that this is not something new, right? That people have been doing this for a very long time.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
What has the reaction been from the community, and what has the communication looked like to the Vietnamese community in light of what's going on with the ICE raids?
Um, it's there's always that initial sort of denial, right? A certain resistance, I guess, because uh, I mean, these conversations again are not new, right? I think ever since even inauguration, right? Like we've already had conversations with our folks about what are their hopes, right? Like what do they want to see in the next 4 years? As you know, right, a lot of our elders tend to vote for Trump or tend to vote red. And this is, due to very particular history, I think, in our community around the legacy of the Vietnam War. But I think in this moment, right, it's uh, it's really hard to deny the reality of things because it's just everywhere, right? And um, I feel like our people are really seeing the ways that this is so dangerous and um, are genuinely freaked out, right? Like not in the sense of panic, because one thing about our people is that, this is not new to them, right? I I think oftentimes when I ask them how do you feel, they'll say I'm not scared, but I'm
Mm,
angry, right? That this is a huge injustice. It's not right. They see the little video footage, right, of people being hurt, thrown on the ground, right? Like tear gas, smoke bombs, everything. I think the recent news, right, with the representative Juan Huynh being sort of intimidated at gunpoint, right, I think was really sort of eye-opening for folks. And at the same time, I think that people are a lot more resilient, I think, um, than they might let on or that people might assume. Because I definitely sort of get the sense, right, that um, we're not scared. We're not
mm,
scared, but tell us like what to do, right? Tell us like what is it actually that is realistic in this moment to protect each other. Um, and again, it's not their first rodeo, right? Like they've lived through many historical sort of events and crises in their lives. So in some ways, I've also kind of been
mm,
learning from them too, right? To see
mm,
the ways that they have very quickly, um, called on their neighbors, right? Like, of course, on VI's part, we wanted to make sure that people understand, um, it's not just about me making phone calls to folks, right? Like, it's also them having to call on their friends and their friends calling on their friends, right? To make sure that this is sort of a real network of community support that can be as expansive as possible. Because, like you said, right, Vietnamese people, I mean, they don't only live in Uptown, and ICE is also not only in Uptown, right? They've been all over the state at this point. So I think in that sense, it's very um, moving to me, I think, to see the ways that um, people have really shown up for their neighbors and friends, um, like Vietnamese elders who, early on in my work were like, I don't want to talk about politics, right? Like, I don't want to, you know, I just want to come here. I met a lot of them through mutual aid first, right? On mutual aid programs. So they'd be like, I'm just here for food and I'm out.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and in these 4 years, I mean, I think there's such a valuable shift in their mentality. And seeing them really embody that in this moment is really powerful.
And how does VAI and other community partners work to support the Vietnamese community that is now responding to the ICE raids?
Uh, Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, like maybe to
Mhm.
clarify it, with the ICE raids that are happening, and we're seeing more from what you said that more Vietnamese folks are starting to respond and find ways to check in with neighbors, to check in with family members. How does VAI help to bring additional support and also
Mm-mm.
maybe with other community partners or the local
Yeah.
elected offices? I'm very curious
Mhm.
what that has looked like now that the community has expressed a lot of concern.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We definitely have been in touch, right, with a lot of local community organizations. Like you said, the elected officials, all the aldermanic offices, right, 46th, 47th, 48th Ward, Representative Juan Huynh, Senator Mike Simmons. Um, they've all been very engaged, I think, in this rapid response work. Um, and our local partners, like Advancing Justice, One North Side, ICER, right, OCAT, so many organizations on our north side have been sort of building out uh, uh, an expansive rapid response network, right, to alert each other as quickly as possible about ICE activity. And on our end, right? Recently, we were approached by folks from Advancing Justice because someone in the community, right, had mentioned that it would be helpful to have um, a training specifically for the businesses on Argyle. Um, and uh, as you know, right, a lot of those business owners are Vietnamese or Chinese speakers. And I think that's why, right, Advancing Justice kind of wanted language support in that moment. And at the same time, I think there was like just like a lot of anxiety, right,
Mm,
around what was happening. And I think for VI, I kind of saw our role, right, as the bridge, I guess, between a lot of these um, Vietnamese and Chinese business owners and the rapid response work that's happening on our north side that is unfortunately, right, um, sometimes isn't really tapping into these folks because you see a lot of people right now volunteering, which is again, it's great, but a lot of them are white.
mm,
And the language barrier, right, and sometimes the cultural barrier, even
mm,
to figure out how to talk about ICE and how to talk about immigration news when, again, a lot of people in our community voted for Trump, right? So how do you kind of bridge that mental sort of uh, uh, this disconnect, I guess? Um, and in some ways, I think it was a great opportunity to talk about community safety on Argyle in general. That's something that business owners have brought up to us in the past as well, before the ice raids, just like how do you build out a support system in that area where business owners and local residents, right, can all kind of support each other in keeping the area safe. Um, and again, that's a very loaded question,
mm,
right? Argyle, Uptown, just when it comes to safety concerns, right? There's a long history there with um, gun violence, gang activity, right? And a history of just disinvestment that leads to safety concerns. Um, and so for us, that those efforts to talk to the business owners, to not just like, I mean, of course, the very immediate action item, right, was just letting them know the facts, right? Like these are your actual legal rights as business owners. These are the things that um, you're able to do and that you should look out for. I think it was super helpful that we had the aldermanic offices there to kind of reassure the owners as well that that there's a lot of people, um, a lot of, I guess, resources available for them for support. But I think the main thing really was um, plugging people in, right? Like plugging you into this network, making sure that you understand it's not really just about one person, right? Because
mm,
sometimes when we're canvassing, folks were like, oh, don't worry about me. I don't have any undocumented staff, right, in my kitchen or whatever. Um, and so some of the work has been like, oh, this is not just like about you or any individual specific case, right? It's about us coming together as a community to look out for each other and also understanding, right, that the way ICE is moving right now, they're not they're not worried about the technicalities, right? It's like they're very openly racially profiling folks. Um, and this is just a real threat in the community, regardless of your status at this point, right? That they're literally everywhere. And so when you're seeing them, right, like tear gassing people, pointing guns at people, right? And at this point, it's not just Latina folks that are being detained, right? There's also already instances of like Black people being detained, Arab, Asian, right? Like people, again, people of color being very blatantly racially profiled. So, um, So I guess to summarize, right, I think the work really is about building relationships um, on top of educating folks. Because I think it's one thing to know
Hmm.
your rights, and I think it's another thing, right, to actually um, know the right people to call on when something happens, right, and moving all together so that you're not isolated in this moment. Because again, I think the problem is just so large, right? Like larger than just one specific case.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much for taking me through the deep dive with this.
Hmm.
Have you gotten any reports of any Vietnamese folks being violently detained by ICE, or what has the ICE presence look like in this uptown community?
Hmm. Yeah, we know there was a case of one person at O'Hare Airport a few months ago, actually, during the first wave of the ICE raids in early summer. Um, and in Uptown specifically, not Vietnamese, but there have been at least three people who were detained in the area in the past, I want to say in the past 2 weeks. And uh, in the month, right, in October, when they have been really active on the north side, there have been so many sightings at this point, right? In the Uptown Edgewater, Lakeview, Ravenswood, like that kind of block, right? That neighborhood area. Um, so yeah, we know that when they detained someone kind of on Sheridan, on the border of Uptown and Edgewater, um, there's there's video footage, right, of uh the person trying to show his paperwork that he had his documents on him, and ICE just did not even bother to check and just detained him anyway. Um, so it's yeah, it's just scary. I think
Hmm.
it's
Right.
scary in the sense that we're really trying to drill it into folks, right? That at this point, it's not really about what's legal, what's not legal, what is right or fair, right? Because I think initially our elders' response was, um, I have my paperwork on me, right? I'm not undocumented. I did everything right. I don't have to worry about
Hmm.
anything. Um, and it's been made very obvious, I think, that that is actually not um, enough of a deterrent, I guess, or not enough
Hmm.
of a safeguard for you against ICE harassment.
With the SNAP benefits about to run out start of November,
Hmm.
what
Yeah.
have you gotten as far as like feedback from the community and the communication? What has that exchange been like to inform community members of what's going on, and what has
Hmm.
the response been so far?
Yeah. Um, well, I mentioned before, right, that VI has a mutual aid space that we've been doing food distributions every 2 weeks for over 4 years now. Um, Again, that space I think was really uh, built out and maintained intentionally, right? Because that has been our main vehicle to kind of meet with people regularly, talk to them about issues in the community, and address, right, very real needs around food scarcity. A lot of our elders go to all the food pantries in the area. Aside from VI, right, there's so many food pantry nonprofits on our north side and throughout Chicago in general. Um, so again, I know that there's a lot of people in the community that rely on SNAP benefits and also in general, right, face food insecurity.
Mhm.
Um, so when this news rolled out, right, obviously immediately my first thing on my mind is, okay, people are going to freak out. And, um, before I even had to bring up the news at mutual aid, which we hosted uh, this past week, people already knew. I mean, they came into our space and were already talking about like the loss of SNAP benefits, right? Already sort of, I could hear them trying to explain to their friends and neighbors, right? What they've seen in the news, when it's going to start, when the cuts, right, will go into effect, all these things. So I can tell, right, that people are feeling the precarity of this moment. And um, it's it's hard. I think it's hard to see. Um, I think it's hard to see the way people are really being worn down by the
Hmm.
constant barrage, right, of crises.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard for me to watch. It's definitely harder for them to live through it, right? Because every single time they hear something in the news, they're the ones who are directly affected by it.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, right, I think we we try to sort of come up with solutions, right?
Hmm.
Because um, at the end of the day, again, we keep each other safe. We're the ones, right, taking care of each other in this moment. So um, it was also really awesome to see the ways that people immediately started like sharing with each other the information of all the food pantries that they know, like their addresses, hours, right? They're like, write it down, write it out on the board, right? So it's like people were very quick to share information with each other. Um, and I think on our end, we're just trying to um, dispel any sort of disinformation that's out there.
Hmm.
I'm not sure, right, if you've been seeing the ways that like right-wing folks are talking about the SNAP benefits and how, that it's just like undocumented people or people of color, right, that use SNAP and, just kind of live off of the state
Hmm.
and whatever, which is absolutely not true, right? It's like according to data, majority, like 90% of SNAP benefits receivers are American citizens, and majority of folks are actually white, right? So this whole narrative about how it's like, oh, all this money, right, is being wasted on undocumented people and all that stuff is all bullshit.
Hmm.
Um, and I think for us, I'm also very careful, right, to make sure that our people understand that, because I think if they hear those type of talking points, it only further creates division, right, in the community,
Hmm.
and the finger then is pointed at each other rather
Hmm.
than at the actual problem at hand.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I was gonna say because like working, especially from a different generation standpoint, this has definitely been an issue for a lot of Vietnamese younger generation Americans in communicating with their parents, their elders, because of the language barrier, because of the
right.
cultural gaps. Like, how has that, I know you've kind of shed some light on this, but how has that been have you been able to feel like the gap is closing a little bit more because there's more clarity or there's a different approach in how you communicate with the elders?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, hard in the sense that, when I first came into my role at VI, I definitely also held that anxiety too. Um, I, I'm also, uh, my family, right, came from, well, my dad's side is from the north. I speak like a northern dialect.
Mm.
Um, I do not really identify as a Vietnamese American just because that's not really the migration um, history that I experienced, right? And I I think like coming into the role, I was like, there's so many sensitive subjects, right? And like
Hmm.
touchy points that is not just about like politics, but also like literally like the difference in my lived experience from the lived experience of like the folks that I work with. Um, and at the same time, now that I've had quite a bit of practice, just thanks to the nature of my job, um, I do feel that it just takes a lot of patience to meet people where folks at. Oh, sorry, to meet people where they're at. And what that means, right, is to do the best that I can to not deny the reality, right, when they share with me um, their interpretation of the world, right, and the news that they see. Because um, I think like whenever I listen to them talk, right, I can tell that the values are the same, right? For example, when we're talking about ICE raids and we're talking about SNAP benefit cuts, right? Um, there was one person who was kind of, I think, really agitated by seeing like the news clips of the ICE agents in the area and like the No Kings protest, right? Like seeing how many people have shown out to support um, the community and all these things. And something in that kind of triggered in him like this uh, rant about communism, right? And how he
Hmm.
really does not
Hmm.
trust Democrats, that this is all right. Um, this is all like a shit show and Democrats are to blame and like da 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 all like it just became a whole thing. Um, again, I was not really surprised to hear it,
Hmm.
but at the crux of what he was saying though, especially as he like it became very obvious later in his rant that he was not really talking about Democrats, he's just talking about the Communist Party, right? And his kind of reliving that
Hmm.
memory of
Yeah,
like in the 70s, right, when he's like escaping the
absolutely.
regime
Absolutely.
and
Hmm.
just like saying all these things and ultimately kind of landing on the talking point of, um, the the Communist Party was not doing things for the people, right? They were doing things for the party. And so the reason why he's so upset with these politicians is because they're not really for the people, right? And that he cares about the freedom and the independence, right, of the people and a truly democratic, right, regime or society. And um, I think it was strange because essentially he kind of talked in a circle and landed where I
Hmm.
kind of wanted people to land, right? In the
Hmm.
sense of like, yeah, let's talk about what it actually means to look out for each other right now and for the people to come together, right? And um, focus on the safety of our community. And I think kind of clearly, right, a lot of trauma and a lot
Hmm.
of sort of unprocessed feelings uh, bubbled up for him. But at the same time, really, um, this is someone who has shown up very consistently in our work, who very clearly cares about the community, cares about the rights and resources for, especially for poor people, right? So, um, he is someone that I think on the surface, right, people might just dismiss him as a Trump supporter because he
Hmm.
does support Trump. But I think when you actually listen to him talk and the values that he's sharing, right, they're very progressive, like in the sense that, he understands, right, that everybody should have a right to food, shelter, dignity, respect, right, safety, all of those things. Um, so I think that's been my process, right? Of like
Mhm.
meeting people where they're at means really trying to get to the bottom of like what are the values you actually hold,
Mm,
regardless of what you're kind of saying in terms of your like political affiliations, whatever it is, right? Like at, at the core of it, you and I share the same values, and that's how we can organize together, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Which also
Um,
takes me, how have the Vietnamese churches and temples been responding to this? Because the Vietnamese population is also very Catholic, which is also very
mm,
rigid. And I also know that it also plays into the Trumpism, the anti-abortion. I'm very curious about what that outreach has looked like if you had already been outreaching with these religious institutions.
yeah. We've been outreaching. Uh, I think we've been trying to build out that relationship because I know that, yeah, the church, right? The church and temple, Chuklam Temple, for example, um, was sort of very um, aligned with us when we went to Springfield this year for our annual lobbying trip. And I think both the church and temple, right, have a strong community base. They, um, I have been able to sort of connect with some of the youth actually that go to um, the Vietnamese church, the Holy Child Jesus Parish, right, and um, some of the staff at the Chuklam Temple. I think that I have less of a sense of how folks are reacting to specifically the ICE raids. But in general, I think it's there is like that at the bottom of it, right? A shared desire um, to build up the Vietnamese community, the power of the Vietnamese community, right, in Illinois. Um, I think I've had less sort of overtly political conversations, I guess, with folks from either institution. So I can't speak too much on that.
Hmm.
But I do know that we get a lot of, um, or we get some youth, both from the temple and the church, who are like, who are always like seeking out, right? Like, where's the Vietnamese community? How do I be part of that? Um, and I think in that sense, that also has been our current efforts to figure out how to uh, how to politicize that process, right? That like seeking out the Vietnamese community also means, um, protecting the vulnerable folks in the
Hmm.
community, right? Defending our rights, etc.
Yeah. Another thing that also sticks out for me with the pending snap cuts are uh, the Viet local grocery stores.
Mm,
In the uptown area, there's Tai Nam, there's Park the Shop, there's Yik Hua, and then in the
mhm,
suburbs, it's Saigon Market, and then Van
mhm,
Dyck.
mhm.
So I'm curious if, because this is going to be very important, because they also benefit from SNAP recipients, and
Right.
also with the tariffs on top of that, which is also crippling um, these store owners. I'm curious if you've gotten any communication or any feedback from these places.
Yeah. I haven't heard directly at the moment, but yeah, I'm also aware, right, that the grocery stores would definitely feel a lot of this burden. Um, we've been in communication with them because of rapid response work around ICE raids. And I think in general, right, these grocery stores have always been very generous with us and are aware, right, of the population that we work with and often donate food to our mutual aid space and also cultural celebrations, right, like Mid-Autumn Fest. So I definitely anticipate, right, that um, these snap the cuts will affect not just our community members, but also the grocery store owners as well.
Mm. And so moving forward, I know that VAI and other community organizations that are connected to this community are basically trying to fan out any all these fires, which is hard to like put out. But what rapid responses are you currently working on to help sustain this emergency response network?
Hmm. Yeah, totally. Um, I mean, one thing I think that we are committed to consistently doing, right, is like calling on our folks. So we built out essentially a phone tree, right, of um, com community members that we know live in specific areas of the city, right? And when we get alerts of ICE being around those areas, we know we're going to call and so and so will then call, right, on their neighbors and et cetera, et cetera. So at this point, we've done the necessary like pod mapping work and the building out of the phone tree so that people know if you receive a call from us, right, we're asking you to disseminate the information as quickly as you can because, right, like the current alerts that you see are often like on Instagram or on social media, but our folks don't use any of those platforms, so phone calls are usually the fastest way. Um, and I think we're continuing to educate folks, right, about the current events, the news, and um, the work, right, to continuously like shift their energies and focus and understanding, right, of this political moment, I think is very important. Um, and Also just building out, right, a base of Vietnamese community leaders, right, who are really willing to be engaged in advocacy work, um, aside from the ICE rapid response and of course like the food assistance funding loss, right? And other issues as they keep rolling out. There's also the closure of the safety net hospital in the area of Rice, right? That has also really
Mhm.
affected our community. Um, and I think we're kind of just building the capacity of our members to uh, to lead the charge, right? To make sure that people can really understand why all these issues do affect Vietnamese Americans in the Vietnamese American community in Illinois, but also at large.
Mhm.
Because I think it's really easy right now to because of the divisive language, right, in the news and in the community, it's easy to write this off as like this doesn't affect us, right? This affects like other communities or only undocumented people, criminals, whatever.
Mhm.
And I think the work right now is to really shift that focus and
Mhm.
re-emphasize that no, right? Like we're not safe unless everyone is safe. And this actually does very directly impact our community here.
Mm. And before we wrap up, how can people support the efforts of VAI um and the uptown or the Vietnamese community in general that's being affected? What ways can people support this work?
Yeah, I mean, we have again the biweekly mutual aid space. We're always looking for volunteers. That's also the way I think that people can really come and meet our community members, build those relationships, right? Get involved. We also have our elder and youth memberships. These are spaces for people who want to be even further engaged in our work and support the community organizing and advocacy efforts. And uh, Always welcome fiscal donations, right? We are about to launch our fundraising campaign. So folks can really follow us on Instagram for most recent updates on the work that we're doing and any calls to actions that are coming up. But um, I think the most important, I think, is just to show up and get to know your neighbors, get to know the people in the community, because nothing can really replace the one-to-one relationships that you can hold with the people that share this earth with you.
Yeah, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show because I know that the work that you and your colleagues are doing is very thankless. It's rapid response mode leads to, sometimes the chaos and the capacity issues that come with it. I mean, I've been in nonprofit for a while and it is not easy work to take on. So I want to say thank you so much for really shedding a lot of light into what is going on into our communities. And I hope that people who are listening can find ways to help support and protect community members. And I really hope nothing more for the safety and protection of our Vietnamese communities in Illinois, all of our communities in Illinois, and really on a national level, because I think that times are very dire. And I think the big takeaway is there's a power of community, there's a power of communication. I think that that is very key to, you know, surviving, but also to strengthen those communities, to strengthen those muscles, and to involve people that never thought to do anything more than just show up at a TUT event or just pick up
Hmm.
food and not communicate with anyone else. I think the hope is that folks are able to engage more or to connect more, and I think that could be a very pivotal moment in this ongoing crisis.
Hmm. Yeah,
So yes,
totally. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
wishing you all the best, and absolutely. And I hope that people get to check out VAI. You can check them out on social media, and yeah, and please follow their work.